Hello, everyone. Welcome to day 8 of the Regeneration Advent Calendar. Moved swiftly on with the Fifth Doctor era from a scarf to cricket. Once again, I am joined with Luke.
Yes, hello everyone. Cricket and a piece of celery, piece of decorative celery, which was a bold decision.
Most definitely civilization.
Indeed. So things have taken a turn for the better in JNT's eyes. He's got more control over the program now. He's got rid of Tom. He's got the Doctor he wants. The show's been freshened up with a younger Doctor in the form of Peter Davison. 29 years old at the time of his casting, would remain youngest until Matt Smith came along at 26.
Yeah, he very
Uh,
much sort of breaks the mold of what the Doctor could and can be, really. I think even at this point, well, Tom Baker started the speculation about, oh, it could be a woman at
mm,
this point. He opened
yeah,
the
it would take a
floodgates.
while longer for that to end up happening.
So that's quite an interesting thing that we could have had a woman doctor for this, but we have Tristan the vet.
Yeah, that was the role he was most famous for at this time from All Creatures Great and Small. So
And
he'd
uh,
already won the hearts of the nation through that, hadn't he?
so, in a way, you could say, it's wrong to say stunt casting, but he would obviously shift a lot of viewers from All Creatures to Doctor Who, really.
Yeah, and I mean certainly it did help the viewing figures as well, because during season 18 they were on the low. But here, switched to a new weekday evening slot on Mondays and Tuesdays. So we're getting 2 episodes a week. So the season went twice as fast. But yeah, it seemed to work. It helped revitalize the show in the eyes of the public. So they
Yeah,
got a bit more interest in it.
I guess it's when like you said, we do get proper JNT's vision of Doctor Who because we get Davison's got his own like proper costume. It feels more of a costume, like we said in Legopolis, but his
Hmm.
outfit does feel very. This is a costume.
Doesn't
Because
quite go as full on as Collins, but we'll get to that.
yeah, this feels very much JNT going. How do I appeal to the American audience? I know Brit. They think we're all cricket lovers. Let's have the Doctor wear a cricket outfit, and that's it's interesting to look at this because obviously this story was filmed out of order.
Yes, it was, because there was a lot of script issues going on at the time. Anthony Root had stepped in after Christopher H. Bidmead decided to leave the post after only 1 year. He wanted more money from the BBC higher ups. He wasn't going to get it, so he walked away from the show. Barry Letts was also on the way out here, as we discussed yesterday. And so, Anthony Root didn't stick around too long either, really. I think it got a bit too stressful for him. And finally, Eric Saywood stepped in later on in season 19 and would remain so until season 23, Trial of a Time Lord. But yeah, for this opening, there was a different script written by the same writers who wrote Meglos. I think that John Flanagan and Andrew McCulloch were writing Project Zeta Sigma, which was a story was meant to be about nuclear disarmament, and somehow the Master was going to be involved and
Um,
such.
I
But
think it was going to have invisible people as well, which made it
no,
completely how would that work? And I think that this is a prime candidate for Big Finish to adapt. If I mean, at the time this video goes out, it might be a lost story. Who knows?
yeah, they might have announced it by now, but yeah, certainly as of time of recording, there is no Project Zeta Sigma in sight. It's just one of those funny little what ifs once again.
Um, it sort of feels like a mixture of Power Play, a Sixth Doctor lost story, which again it could have been a Fifth Doctor story actually, and like the Starmen in a way. It sort of
Mm.
feels like a mishmash of that's what the story could have been.
Yeah, it certainly feels like it would have been very different from what we got, and very different from anything in season 19, really.
It,
Uh,
it, it feels like an interesting place to. How do you shift from Legopolis to that? Really, I feel like Castrovalva is a nice sort of bridging point between those two. I feel.
yeah, it's certainly, of what we've done so far, this probably feels like the most bridged story. Maybe because they're both written by the same writer, that helps. And, they've got the same villain as well. but it's not quite an 8-parter, but there's definitely a trilogy there to it, isn't there?
Yes.
And it's
Yeah.
dealing with similar themes, like we said, with recursion, which comes back in a big way in this story. But yeah, basically, Project J Sigma wasn't working, it wasn't going anywhere. The production team were ready to get started on pre-production, building sets and such, but they had no script to work from. So while John Nathan Turner was off at conventions in America, uh, Anthony Root went to Barry Letts to try and figure this out, and Skilled had decided that they'd bring a different story forward instead, which became Four to Doomsday. So that was the first Fifth Doctor story recorded. And the way it all worked out in the end was that John Nathan Turner wanted Peter to get like a handle on the part first, wasn't it, before he recorded his first story. So Castrovalva didn't come along until fourth in the production block. We had Visitation and Kinder in the meantime.
I mean, you can definitely see that Davison's a very, it's wrong to say fully formed because he's a Doctor what evolves as time goes on. But it's interesting seeing him because he said that in, I think, the making of Four to Doomsday, that he didn't get much guidance, really. I think if you look at what he was given, here's a cricket outfit, how do you make that part of his character? And they try to incorporate that in season 19.
It didn't help that was Four to Doomsday was very much written for Tom as well.
I mean, you can foresee that Peter's going in there with full of energy, and obviously they're all second guessing where they're at in this time, whether they're all getting on and all that sort of stuff. And yeah, it feels totally unlike a Fifth Doctor story. It feels unlike the Fifth Doctor completely. He's very squeaky within it. Really, that story. He's very playing to that high pitch nature within it.
Yeah, he certainly does bounce around a little bit in between then. Like Kinder feels a bit more normal, but Visitation, he's quite prickly, isn't he? Like he has that moment where Adric flies the TARDIS, and he's like just a bit pissed off with him. He's like, I like long walks.
I mean, he gets a bit of exercise in this towards the end of the story when
Yeah,
they
they
run
go
back
for a
to
bit
the
of a jog,
TARDIS.
don't they?
Yeah.
But I think when it comes to post-regeneration trauma, like the way that's been dealt with in previous stories is more of a way to allow the actor to settle into the role of the Doctor, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like within Spearheads and Robot, it's sort of there to explain away any eccentricities that may later be smoothed out, and also just give the actor a chance to settle in a bit. Whereas here, Peter's already had time to settle in. He knows how he wants to play the character because, well, he's been doing it for 12 episodes before this. And yet, nevertheless, this is the longest time that a Doctor takes to recover, up to this point at least. Because it's, even in part 3, he's still suffering, isn't he?
Yeah, because it explores the idea of what happened if a regeneration fails, because we get some lovely moments in this where we have him sort of mimicking the first 3 Doctors. I don't think he mimics Tom.
No, which I think is fair enough and
Yeah.
also makes sense. I suppose it's also a bit of foreshadowing to the 11 in a way.
Yeah, it is, yeah.
The idea that maybe these incarnations are still sort of in there, but tapped into in a different way.
Another thing about Castrovalva, the working title for this, John Nathan Turner wanted to call it The Visitor, which Christopher H. Bidmead wasn't too keen on. And another thing about the idea of this is that in, I think, BBC Television Centre, there was the MC Escher print of Castrovalva, and apparently Bidmead was inspired by that, but he has testified that no, that's complete rubbish, that he was inspired by Escher way before that. Yeah, which is odd, but there we go.
Yeah, I suppose there we have it. Also, this story is the first in Doctor Who history to have a pre-title sequence.
Yeah, it makes it feel very new and different. Like, is this the new style of Doctor Who?
Yeah, it very much has that grand start of a new era feel to it. And thanks to that replay of the end of the previous story, we get Tom Baker saying a line which makes this the first time since the Three Doctors that another Doctor has said a line in a different Doctor's story. Or more. Right. But it wouldn't be long until that changes, because Earthshock, we have the
Yes.
replays of previous cyber encounters. So, yeah, also the pre-title sequence means that the titles themselves are slightly out of sync, because we cut to the music while we're still looking at Peter's grinning face before we go to the visuals of the titles. And so they all end up playing slightly out of sync. The music's a little bit early on it. But because this is the first version of this new title sequence with the Fifth Doctor's face in it, is it really out of sync, or is it the rest of them that are out of sync? Because this is the original, so to speak, if we're asking the big questions here.
Yeah, that is big brain. That's a thing to ponder on. That's like a 3 a.m. thought, that is. Speaking of like 3 o'clock, rather interesting. The first country to see the Fifth Doctor was BBC Scotland. The first episode aired on the 4th of January 1982 at 3:30.
Was there any reason for this? Or
no idea.
Maybe there was something going on in Scotland later that night, and so they had to.
We'll give him David Tennant. No, not David Tennant. You might be watching it, but never mind. We'll just give him Castrovalva now. It'll be all right. They can watch it early. Get that Surrey man out of the way. We've got rid of the scarf man.
There we go.
Yeah, and another little bit of Docu sort of history and heritage in it. Caroline Ford's niece is in it. She plays the little girl who does the counting in part
really?
3. Yeah.
It's a small thankless role, but I think she does bring a lot to it, to be fair.
Yeah, it's a nice little moment. I mean, I like it when a Doctor interacts with like younger kids. So there's some quite heartwarming about it, really.
Yeah, it's quite wholesome seeing those moments.
Yeah. Because like that's the demographic the show's aiming for, and I think it's a nice little thing, really. Because as a kid, you'd go, "Oh, I wish I was that kid."
Or usually just end up being jealous of the kids.
Yeah, true.
I could be cooler than Kenny. I could blow up a school if I wanted to.
What you get up in your personal life has nothing to do with me.
Pertusive 11 accepts no responsibility for the actions of co-host Luke.
That's true. You've got your own.
I'm a free agent.
Yeah, you are at this point. Oh, there we go.
I suppose on that note, shall we dive into the synopsis for Castrovalva?
Oh gosh, this is going to be a tough one. I'll try my best.
I think I've got quite an easy job with part 1 because it's pretty simple A to B stuff.
Yeah.
We pick off right where Logopolis left off. The Fifth Doctor's lying there on the ground, and the Fourth Doctor's lying there on the ground, actually, because like I said, we had the pre-title sequence. Regenerates into the Fifth Doctor, and then it's run back to the TARDIS, but they end up getting caught by the security that was on their tail 9 months ago.
They've been running it a long time.
Yeah, if we're going by air dates. But also, this wasn't shot in the same place, actually.
Yeah, you do notice it, don't you, with like how the TARDIS is?
Yeah, they went and shot it elsewhere. And so they get arrested by the security guards, but they also bring an ambulance along for the Doctor because they can see he's not well. Tegan and Nyssa hijack the ambulance and drive off. It's quite a funny little jump that Nyssa does as it's on the go. And you get Janet Fielder doing some quite serious driving faces.
But what a great bit of music for it. Like, it's probably my favourite bit of music within this.
The story definitely has some catchy tunes, doesn't it?
Yes, yeah, for sure.
Adric isn't quite so lucky. He manages to get caught by the security. But then the Master is still stuck around. His TARDIS materializes, zaps all the security men, and leaves again mysteriously while Adric is down on his knees in front of the Master's TARDIS. What has Anthony Ainley been up to?
Or should I say, Oh, what's his name? What's the little credit they give him as the portreeve? Neil
I
Tournay. Neil Tournay.
I Yeah, an anagram of Tony Ainley.
Oh, his dad, I think, isn't it?
Oh. Yeah,
But yeah,
so they all cram into the TARDIS, the Doctor's TARDIS. The Doctor's acting very funny. Adric's also acting a bit off. Or is it just his usual rudeness? Because Tegan very much comments on, that boy didn't even say thank you. Like, I'm assuming in the context of the story that's meant to mean something's a bit off with Adric here. But when you look at the rest of Adric's time on the show with the Fifth Doctor and his more fraught relationship with Tegan, I don't think it's anything quite out of the ordinary.
pass me the sodium chloride. What's that, Doctor? Salt.
Oh dear.
Oh, damn.
So the Fifth Doctor is picking away at Tom Baker's famous scarf.
That's why people hate him. I'm just saying. That's why
It
people
wasn't
have a bit of a grudge against him.
Wasn't a great first impression. I'm sure many children cried that day, seeing it being whittled away piece by piece.
Oh.
He's then going back through, like, his past regenerations a bit, having some memories as well, isn't he? Because some of them are quotes from older story, or not. I don't know if any of them are quite quotes, but certainly he's calling Adric Jamie instead,
And Tegan Vicky.
references to the Brigadier. Yeah. So obviously, I think there's even a Joe reference, isn't there, as well?
Yeah, there's Joe, yeah.
Yeah. So certainly there's a bit of dissociation going on there with the Fifth Doctor as he struggles with this regeneration. But after he's done unpicking the scarf, he finds his new costume nicely left waiting for him. And so he sneaks off to get changed into that. Meanwhile, Nyssa and Tegan are trying to work out what on earth's going on. Trying to pilot the TARDIS, trying to find the index file, aren't they? And this is when we get the first mention of recursion in the story, as Tegan mentions, if we had an index file, we could look
the
it
magic
up under
word.
index file. Yeah.
If.
Yeah. And that Nyssa points out that that's an example of recursion where orders are falling back on themselves. And so Adric's now disappeared pretty much. There's like that odd scene with the Fourth Doctor where he just gets up and walks away, really. But the Master seems to be watching him. He tells Adric that there's no escape. So the Fifth Doctor now wants the Zero Room so that he can relax and settle into his new regeneration. Tegan and Nyssa help him there. And, that is where he does his little levitation act, really. Luckily improved on the updated special effects, which, like Logopolis, that's the version we watched for this one. But even that, it's only improved, but yeah, it's still a bit awkward.
Like, why doesn't his coat, not just flap down?
Not true. Yeah, it's a bit of a weird one. Or maybe he's using the Force to hold that up.
I mean, yeah. Second Doctor to levitate, first one being the Third Doctor in the comics.
There we go. And then Adric suddenly pops up in the Zero Room as well. But it isn't him, it's just an illusion. He's trying to get a message to Nyssa and Tegan. And so they head back to the console room and things are starting to heat up a bit. And they see that their course is locked on for a huge inrush of hydrogen, Event 1, the Big Bang. They're heading for the creation of the universe. The Fifth Doctor at this point has also realised something's not quite right within the Zero Room. And so he is making his way to the console room, isn't he?
Yeah.
And that is the cliffhanger to part 1 as the Master waves goodbye to Nyssa and Tegan, saying, "Farewell, my friends, farewell forever."
Oh, pure camp goodness.
Yeah, he's sort of camping it up a bit since Logopolis.
Yeah, because he wrote a nice letter to JNT saying, "Please, can I come back? I enjoyed it."
I had a good time.
So part 2, we continue with Nyssa turning off the scanner because she can't dread to see her father's face being used for evil. And that's all they can...
It's quite funny though, isn't it? The way
Yeah.
stuff. Like, it's that face, I hate it. Tegan's just like, is there nothing we can do? Yes, there's this, Nyssa says, as she just turns the screen off.
Oh, it's just so bizarre. So the Doctor has regained consciousness as he's been given some medical supplies because he banged his head. And the TARDIS has given him a little bit of a helping push from the medical supply, and of course, this wheelchair.
Yeah, the
Um,
transport of delight.
Move softly on. So off he goes to the control room to help Nissa and Tegan. So we're
I
back.
suppose that's where the 12th Doctor got a taste for it. That's
I
why he nicked Stavros's chair in,
Oh,
which is familiar.
anyone for Dodgems? Yeah. So meanwhile, we have the Master sort of talking to Adric. You might as well join me, because it's the win inside, and we learn more about sort of Event One and all that sort of stuff. So the Doctor arrives at the TARDIS console room. It's quite hot in there, so his sort of neural pattern is able to cope with it because the adrenaline's sort of keeping him stable,
Yeah,
isn't
it's
it?
spiking it. Yes. Clearing his mind a bit more, isn't it?
So he's quickly at work trying to give Nissa, what to do, and they come to the solution that they have to jettison some rooms, which we've seen the jettison from Legopolis as they jettison Romana's room.
Romana's room, yeah.
But there's a bit of fear mongering about what happens if we jettison the console room. They don't do that, so they're pulled out of Event One, and Adric is hiding something to the Master that the Doctor's actually survived. And this is when they begin a trap within a trap sort of theme within the story. So the Doctor's collapsed again because regeneration's failing.
Yeah.
So
the temperature's returned to normal now, hasn't it?
Yeah, so he's back to his sort of
doddery self.
So he's out of action, and they find out that the Zero Room is no more, and Nissa has to use some of assemble a Zero cabinet, as it were, while we have Tegan finding out that Castrovalva might be the best place to go. So she assumes that she's piloting the TARDIS, has a bit of a rough ride. The cabin is assembled, the Doctor goes in, and off they go to get help in Castrovalva. So the Doctor's levitating to make life a little bit easier for them. And
well, some of the time he is.
Some of the time he's losing concentration because he's been a bit of a silly man. And it causes a bit of trouble for our new companions. And this is quite nice because it gives chance to explore more about Tegan and Nissa because they're still fairly new and fresh.
They haven't interacted much before this either.
Yeah. So
Nissa only came into Legopolis halfway through.
So it's quite nice to get those moments as we have Tegan spotting Castrovalva with this a castle on top of these rocks, which I think is quite a nice striking image.
Particularly the special edition one.
Yeah, I think that's a wonderful sort of. It doesn't feel out of place. It feels very in keeping, much like Legopolis in a way. I feel like those are the best updated effects, really, when they don't take you out of the story. They just sort of enhance what's already there.
Yeah, Castrovalva is very much even better than Legopolis, I'd say, at doing that. It does feel like just a smoothing, it's just taking away some of the rougher edges that the original effects had. It's not about completely redoing them with CGI and making them look over the top. It's just about, smoothing over those rougher edges that the original had. And certainly with some of them, you won't even notice, like the castle. As great as it looks, I didn't even realise that was a new effect the first time. Because it's quite a different looking castle, but it still looks very much right for the era, right for the story.
Yeah, there are more of the obvious moments, like when the TARDIS is heading towards Event One, but that just looks stunning. Yeah. You're just like, that's a beautiful render of the Yardley box. But I guess going back to the plot of Castrovalva, Nissa and Tegan hide the Zero cabinet under some bushes and bracken. And this is when they spot these tribal people in these sort of weird furry costumes. The Doctor escapes.
Not that kind of furry costume.
No, yeah, kind of a bit like the Sparrodons in a way, that sort of shabby fur look, really.
Yeah.
So Nissa and Tegan go back and they find some blood, and the cabinet's empty, and that is where we end part 2.
Yeah. I suppose during part 2 as well, we've also chipped away at Nissa's costume gradually, haven't we?
Yeah.
Like she started off with the full look she had in Keeper of Traken and Logopolis, that almost Traken regalia, I suppose. And then she's become more of the look we know her as from the Fifth Doctor era. You know, she's in the trousers now. She's lost that sort of comb type headpiece that was in her hair. And yeah, she had a bit of a fall into the river, didn't she?
Yes, yeah. And that, yeah, which is the funny moment for it, I guess.
Yeah. She probably made that face a bit later on during the filming of Part 4 due to a certain incident involving Matthew Waterhouse, which we'll discuss at some points.
By literally a point. Yeah.
Dear. Certainly, it's weird though, some of those shots as well, because some of it does feel quite nicely like this alien forest.
Yeah.
And other times you're seeing farmers' fields in the distance, and it does feel like, you're just
on a country estate
on Earth. Yeah.
I mean, I think that's the beauty about Castrovalva is the film trims. I think that's what makes it oddly, wow, this is fresh and exciting.
And yeah, having it on Blu-ray now, having it in HD quality, it really does look crisp.
I think season 19 is probably the best season to benefit the Blu-ray treatment so far in the collection
I think that's
range.
why they did it so early, isn't it? Because they did have the original film trims that they could upscale to true HD.
It's definitely want to convert people going, this is why you should double dip, well, triple dip in some people's cases.
Yeah. I mean, God knows how many times people have dipped with Spearhead from Space.
I mean, people joke about Sharda, but Spearhead, my goodness, I've bought that more times than Sharda.
Yeah, so I suppose on to Part 3 now. The Doctor has been brought into... Oh no, he's not quite been brought into Logopolis yet, because they spot him wandering around outside. Sorry.
Yeah. And that's one thing I find, going back to like the film trims and that, it does become a bit awkward when you're cutting from studio to location within this.
Yeah. So that's why a lot of directors, I think, prepared to use outside broadcast, didn't they?
I think that shows why Barry Letts was a bit ahead of his time with like Robot, just to blend it all together, really.
Yeah. But at the same time, it's like backfired looking back at it, because they wouldn't have known then, but film would very much be the better one for preserving and upscaling these things to make them look even better for later audiences. But yeah, at the time, it was just a case of, this just looks different.
Yeah.
But to be honest, it doesn't really take me out of it too much in Castrovalva, though.
It's a fleeting bit, but you do notice it.
I think it's worse in certain stories where they use it for both, like, where there's location bits outside and there's also CSO bits outside.
Yeah.
Or just like a location that's meant to be outside but is obviously a studio anyway, and cut in between those ones. Yeah. That's what gets built. Whereas with this, it's all like inside the TARDIS and inside the Castrovalva itself. I don't think it sticks out too much because it is a separate location from the outside of Castrovalva anyway, when it's on film. But yeah, so I'm trying to think. There's definitely quite a few stories where you have location and then you have a studio, like, outside area built up. But yeah, nothing's coming to mind at the moment.
It'll come to you.
Yeah. I'll be like halfway through the synopsis, but aha, time flight.
I mean,
it doesn't quite use it there, but yeah, that's something similar.
Yeah, probably Visitation actually.
No, I don't think they do that.
Yeah, because you get them climbing in like the house, don't you? And that sort of shifts in there.
Yeah, I suppose so. But still, that's like inside. That's inside the house. Anyway, this is not something that needs to be discussed this in depth, I suppose. It's just something that's going to bug me for a little while. But yes, anyway, Part 3. We have Nyssa and Tegan discovering that the Zero cabinet is empty. The Doctor is gone. So they go around to look for him. And while they do, they spot him on the rocks, but then lose track of him again. The Doctor himself runs into the hunting party, who have been out there, the ones that Nyssa and Tegan ran into earlier. and they invite him into Castrovalva, and they're quite nice, friendly people, aren't they?
Yeah.
Really, we find out these Castrovalvans. Nissa and Tegan, while looking around, suddenly find a rope ladder, which always feels like a bit of a comedic scene, doesn't it?
Yeah.
As the rope ladder drops to them.
Do you think that's Paul
And so,
Treve giving them that?
yeah, perhaps. Yeah, I don't think it's ever really revealed, is it?
I
Yeah,
mean, like most things in this story, nothing's really clear.
something that became clear to me on this viewing that I didn't quite pick up on before was the sexism of Castrovalva. Because there's quite a few lines, like when Nissa and Tegan are first brought in. So I can't remember the characters' names, but they're just like, oh, it's women.
Or like Sharavar and like, oh, what's the other one? Oh,
Yeah. It's like Shardavar, isn't it? And
Shardavar and Ruther. Yeah.
You got the librarian and you've got the chemist.
Yeah. Michael Sheard, yeah.
Yeah. Who played many roles throughout Doctor Who history.
Very good actor.
Yeah. So yeah, we are inside Castrovalva now. The Doctor's given a warm welcome, but he's still feeling a bit odd, so he's sent to sleep. But before he does, the Portreeve appears in his room. He's like, don't tell anyone it's past my bedtime. And the Doctor doesn't know who the Doctor is at this point. He's sort of murmuring things about how, oh, I'm looking for the Doctor, I think. And Portreeve says, good night, Doctor. So obviously this Portreeve person knows a bit more than he's letting on. I wonder who this, what this Portreeve could be.
I mean, it's good makeup. I say that.
Yeah, and Anthony Ainley does a great job, like playing this nice older man. I suppose he's had the practice with Tremas, hasn't he, before this?
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah. So Nissa and Tegan are a bit less accepting of the Castrovalvans' hospitality. They want to find a doctor, find out what's going on here. So they're, oh, if you insist. So they show them the Doctor asleep and then show them to their own room. But they're still a bit fishy about all that's going on here, aren't they?
Yeah.
I think the next morning they are all woken up and they get to reunite with the Doctor. But the Doctor doesn't quite know about Adric yet because he's mysteriously disappeared. I think Nissa's also had like a visitation from Adric in a mirror as the Master's manipulating him to give the companions breadcrumbs. And so they are then taken for a meeting with the Portreeve, where they have a nice little chat. And then Nissa says she wants to look into
library.
I think telebiogenesis, isn't it? She wants to look up in the library to help with the Doctor's regeneration.
Yeah.
Because he's still having some troubles with that. 3 parts into the story, certainly it's lasting a bit longer than usual.
Yeah, it's a JNT trend, isn't it? It happens in Twin Dilemma as well.
Yeah. I mean, arguably it happens throughout season 22 also.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, so what happens after this? Can you remember? I'm a bit stumped with this one.
I think this is when Portreeve shows like the tapestry, isn't it? And about the knowledge and the long forgotten techniques about the waving and all that sort of stuff of it.
Yeah, so like part of this history he's made up, really. Yeah, so Nissa, meanwhile, realizes that there is no technical section in the library, so instead decides to read the history of Castrovalva instead.
As she does.
Yeah, there you go. And so eventually they start to realize that things aren't quite right here, so they decide it's better for them to leave, don't they? But while they are trying to leave, they keep ending up back in the same place, back in the square. And so after a while of going back and forth, the Doctor sees the recursion itself folding in on itself. Castrovalva is an MC Escher painting. It is all a bit topsy-turvy, and they are caught in a space-time trap. That's the end of episode 3.
Yeah, and we have this is when we get the realization that the Fifth Doctor realizes Adric's missing because he leaves the square and he counts like, oh, Adric.
Yeah, that's happening as well, isn't it? And so I
Yeah.
think he bursts in before that to say, where is it? And then that's why they're heading off.
But yeah, part four, we have the Doctor collapsing again, and he urges Nyssa and Tegan to find the Zero Cabinet um, to sort of help with the spatial anomaly. So he goes back to his
Mm.
room and he puts like a mirror to sort of lessen the effects. And
Yeah,
this is when sort of the pharmacy turns up and he does like a map of Castrovalva and he realizes he's got four pharmacies
yeah.
going on.
But it's all the same pharmacy. Just I think he said it could be approached from many different ways. But he's certainly starting to click now that all is not right with Castrovalva.
So this is when we start to the Doctor starts to get people on board about Castrovalva that things aren't all what they seem, but there are. Portreeve's got multiple houses, so they sort of have a little plan to go and see the Portreeve. So they fill the Zero cabinet up with books, and the Doctor finds a note from one of the books what has Shadowvar's handwriting. So that's the person he wants to see because he suspects that Shadowvar knows more what's going on than what he's letting. So off the procession goes to the Portreeve's house, and the Doctor sees Shadowvar and notices this window, which is the Portreeve's house, which is the sort of epicenter of what's going on.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah, it starts to affect him a bit more the closer he gets, doesn't it?
and this is when we get the reveal that it's the Master behind it. And
Shock horror.
mustache twirl. And we have the Doctor climbing up the window to deal with it, and we have the Master being quite deranged, trying to access the Zero cabinet and saying, "You fool, I'm going to
Yeah,
kill
he's
you."
very much going off on one, isn't he?
Yeah,
And this is where sort of like the Master's plan starts to fall apart a bit.
yeah.
Because
I
it's like,
will be
if you
honest.
just wanted to kill the Doctor, why have you got this entirely complex space-time trap where you've had him right next to you a couple of times already? You were in his room. Could you not have just killed him then?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's
um,
like he has to get the aha, I got you moment, doesn't he? But even then, it doesn't feel like he's quite getting that.
yeah. So the Doctor is confronted and reveals that the tapestry behind it is Adric in the web.
My web.
My web. But we have a lovely moment from Shadowvar as he swings on the chandelier, going, "You may have made us people, but we are real," and
Yeah.
yeets himself off into the web and dies in the process. And Adric
Yeah.
is free. Um, and this is when it starts to collapse, isn't it? Really, and
Yeah, Castrovalva folds on itself fully.
and then they run off, and the Master's stuck in the sort of castle area, and they jog back to the TARDIS, and that is the end of Castrovalva, really, the start of a new era. It's
Yeah.
simply splendid.
Mm. Yeah, and during those final scenes, Matthew Waterhouse had a bit too much to drink the night before, was somewhat hungover, and so
I mean, you
I
can
think it was
blame.
his 18th, wasn't it, the day before? Or something?
No, that was when they were filming Logopolis on the motorway
Oh,
because they had
yeah,
birthday cake when they were filming it.
oh. Yeah, certainly he wasn't feeling that great. You could see it when you watch the scenes. He's very groggy. And apparently while Peter Davidson's delivering one of his lines, he was there throwing up behind a tree. So that's very much an ew moment from Nissa.
Oh, um, yeah, what a moment that is, really.
Yeah.
But I guess you can blame it on the Master's web effect.
Yeah, you could just
Training
say,
him.
he's still been a bit strained by it.
Yeah.
Yeah. You could definitely see the problems with four companions, I suppose, in this era. In that
Yes.
one always ends up being sidelined. Usually it's Nissa, but here instead it's Adric, which works out quite nicely for Nissa because she very much gets to build that friendship with Tegan, which I think is very much necessary. And they are very much the heart of the story for the first two parts, really.
Yeah, they are very much so.
They're really carrying it.
Um,
And even
yeah,
beyond that, because the Doctor's, like we say, his post-regeneration trauma is lasting quite a while.
yeah. I mean, I guess it does have that sort of new series feel to it, really. Like it is that sort of continuation, isn't it? But Castro Alva as a story, how do you feel on it?
I feel like it's just a fun watch. It's quite relaxing.
it does have that sort of tranquil feel, especially like the location stuff.
Hmm.
Just feel very relaxing in that sense.
Yeah. I mean, certainly, like we've said, it doesn't make much sense by the end of it with the master's plan, but
Yeah,
I feel like this is a better execution of recursion than we got in Legopolis. It's quite like a cool concept going to this MC Escher style uh, dwelling place, I suppose.
hmm.
Yeah.
But
So I think that's
I like the society. I like the
yeah,
Castrovalvians. I think they're great.
yeah, and them trying to sort of like unpick the mystery from within
Yeah,
as they make the Castrovalvans question their own world and their own history. I think that's interesting stuff.
I think for me, I think it falls apart when we actually go to Castrovalva.
Oh, really?
I think when we enter that castle, that's when I start to drift out of the story. I love all this stuff about Event One and that. I like stories where we're exploring the TARDIS. I enjoy that sort of side of it, but I think, and I enjoy like the wandering location stuff. Like we said, the film inserts from the Blu-ray just makes it feel very fresh and it just makes it pop. But when we
Yeah.
get to sort of midway through part three, really, I just start clock watching.
Yeah. I think you may have been able to hear during the synopsis there, we were a bit confused at times as to what happens in parts 3 and 4 in particular.
Hmm.
Yeah, I do start to lose track of those bits.
It's. I feel like Legopolis feels quite tame compared to this because I feel like this is unhinged Bidmead.
Hmm.
This is Bidmead just
Which
going,
is funny
well,
because
my
this is
last one.
Bidmead with a script editor.
Yeah,
Whereas Legopolis, he would have just been doing that by himself because he was the script editor. I don't know if maybe Anthony Root was him by that point and
I think he probably
was
was.
like
Yeah,
shadowing him, but still, this is like him officially with a script editor.
yeah, because I think Anthony Reed, I think Bidmead left, and then they brought him back to write the first story because like the first story, like say Zeta Major or whatever it was called, collapse or whatever.
Yeah.
Um,
Which is allowed for a nice bit of continuity between Legopolis and this because they are exploring similar themes. And it does very much pick up where that one left off and concludes like this New Beginnings trilogy, really.
yeah, I mean that is the way you sort of do watch it as a kid. It's sort of ingrained in you from like the DVD line for me.
Yeah. Even though there's like a 9-month gap between them.
Yeah. But yeah, it just the part one opening as well just feels very different. You know, it's quite an action start, isn't it? With them just running to the TARDIS. It doesn't really let go of that action really, but then it just sort of grinds to a halt when we're off from that really.
Yeah, I suppose it's almost like got part 3 is its part 1 because that's like, the traditional start of a story where you arrive somewhere and you're exploring this new society.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Whereas instead, like the Castrovalva of the title, we don't even get to until part 3. Really, I mean, we get to the planet in part 2, but there's like no even mention of it in part 1.
Yeah. I just feel it's a bit of a confusing mess. I think for me, I enjoy this story at a surface level. If you ask me to dive deeper, I'd probably struggle because I have no idea what the master's plan is. Was it to trap the Doctor in the castle and like just live out the recursion?
Yeah, that's the thing, isn't it?
And then what happens if Adric died? Because he can't sustain that forever.
Like, did he want the Doctor in the web? Maybe. Yeah. I think again, similar to Legopolis, it's Bidmead being interested in these hard science concepts, and less so being interested in villain motivations.
Yeah, it's very much science first, story after.
Yeah. I mean, it's nice that we're bringing back block transfer computation with Adric.
Yeah, that's interesting though. How does that work? Like, I feel like a right dummy here. How does that block transfer work in this story? Like, is that him just creating the castle?
Yeah, pretty much.
That's it. I thought it'd be a bit deeper.
Well, I suppose, and the recursion. It sounds mathematics in a way, isn't it?
Oh yeah, because you've got like the Doctor counting like 1, 2. Oh, is that other companions? I don't know. Is that?
Yeah, that was just the companions really, because he's
I see. I thought that was him sizing up like the recursion sort of thing. Like, oh, this is how many squares, and then just because yeah.
No, no, it's just because just before that you have the scene where the Portreeves showing him his companions bringing him to Castrovalva.
Oh
And so
yeah.
he's like, oh yeah, all three of them. Nissa, Tegan, and Nissa. So he's struggling to remember Adric a bit there. It's okay, he's quite forgettable. Forgive you, Peter.
He knew what was going to happen in Airshock before. He's like, yeah, he's the one who's getting dive bombed.
Yeah. Yeah, so like watching this and seeing how well Nissa and Tegan work together, you can see why Adric was the one who ended up getting written out.
But it's quite interesting because Fiona Cummings had to sort of give the cast a bit of a warning, going, "You guys, you don't know each other yet." So it's quite interesting that that was sort of given, really.
But I think certainly when you look at behind the sofas and such and different interviews they've done since and commentaries, you can tell they very much are a bit of a family in a way, aren't they?
They're the most joyous to watch on those Blu-rays because they'll happily rip each other apart, and it's just quite entertaining to watch.
Mm. Yeah, there's a lot of teasing and stuff, particularly between Janet and Peter.
Mm.
But it's always very wholesome as well. It's like they'll be very sharp in person, but they'll sing each other's praises behind their backs. And yeah, I think with a lot of the Fifth Doctor's era, it's almost better watching it with the commentary track on.
Yeah.
Just adds a lot of joy to it. And I mean, they're quite big critics of the story sometimes as well, aren't they?
Yeah, they're very much, they'll tell you how it is, really, whether they like it or not.
Mm.
I like that, really, but they don't shy away from it. Like, if there was a problem, they'll tell you the problem.
Yeah, very much. I think Peter Davison was quite critical of some of the directors, wasn't he?
Hmm.
It's always almost better when you don't have the director there on the track as well.
Yeah, I think he was quite critical of Castrovalva in terms of the direction of it.
Wow.
But again, he couldn't really do a Tom on it because this was his, early on in his time, and he's just doing as he's told, really. And he was still relatively new to TV when he started doing Doctor Who, really.
I suppose, like, after hearing about the atmosphere on set when Tom was there, he doesn't want to go and recreate that, does he?
Yeah, I think he wanted to be the easiest person in the room, and I think you definitely get that sort of open-faced, pleasant.
Very much a happy company.
Yeah, you definitely get that, and I think that's a nice way to end Castrovalva, that nice little smile. It's a bit like Spearhead from Space. That sort of reassurance for, don't worry, the show's fine, this is the new Doctor, and I hope you enjoy the ride.
Yeah. But did we enjoy the start of the ride? What are you going to give this as a rating?
Like I said, it's surface level enjoyment, and that's no criticism. I think, like I say, the plot does get a bit messy with the plan, but I enjoy all the location work. It feels fresh and vibrant. Peter Davison's a joy to watch. I think it's quite interesting, even though this isn't his first story filmed. It's interesting to see him find that feat and go for it. And also, his feet actually do regenerate in this, actually. Because Tom obviously wore boots and Peter had the shoes and socks. What Tom only wore once, I think, I think it was Leisure Hive. But for me, I'm gonna give it a 7.
I'll agree there.
Okay, there we are, same page.
Yeah, I do enjoy it more than the Gopless. I think maybe part of that is down to Peter's energy coming into the show.
Yeah, you can definitely see that revitalization, that sort of new blood sort of kicking in.
It's not quite as dour and somber either.
Yeah,
that's good. It's a bit more of a fun watch, and like I say, quite a relaxing watch as well, particularly early on, like part 2.
Yeah, it's. I feel like it's suited for a Sunday afternoon.
Yeah, it's like a leisurely stroll. This story, isn't it? You don't take it too seriously, and you can still enjoy it.
Yeah, it does what it says on the tin. It's Fifth Doctor. This is his first story. This is JNT's in full swing, really. Yes, that's us
So,
done.
yeah.
Swiftly on.
Swiftly on to the caves of Androzani, where things are going to get a lot less leisurely and a lot more dangerous, aren't they?
Yeah, very bleak, and a very stylistic story in terms of
Mm.
direction from Graham Harper. But again, that's all for tomorrow. And I guess we'll do a bit of an overview of the Fifth Doctor as a character, where we stand on Peter Davison as the Doctor. So that's all to look forward to in the Caves of Androzani.
Mm. Yes, until then, please do remember to leave a like, hit the subscribe button if you haven't already, because Ben would very much appreciate it, wouldn't you?
It'll be delightful, absolutely splendid.
Indeed. So, see you all tomorrow for the caves of Androzani.
Take care, everyone. Bye bye.